I want you to try something. Just hold your hands out in front of you, palms facing up.
Okay.
Now, imagine you're holding a delicate, fragile, living thing right there in the center of your palms. You can actually feel its pulse, right? A slight vibration against your skin.
Yeah, like a small bird or something.
Exactly. And you have to balance it incredibly carefully because if your hands shake or, if you lose focus, you might drop it.
Right.
But then as you're looking down at this fragile thing, the realization hits you. This isn't an object. It's actually a portion of your best friend's life. Or maybe it's a portion of a complete stranger's life.
It's a terrifying image, really, when you sit with it.
It is.
Just the sheer weight of holding someone else's vulnerability like that. But it perfectly sets the stage for the philosophical collision we are exploring today.
It really does. And welcome to this deep dive, everyone. Today, our mission is to unpack a monumental clash between two absolute giants of Danish intellectual history.
Two very different thinkers.
Radically different. On one side, we have Søren Kierkegaard, the famous 19th century father of existentialism, and on the other, K.E. Løgstrup. He's a brilliant 20th century philosopher and theologian whose ideas challenge, well, quite literally everything we think we know about being an individual.
Absolutely everything.
We're going to explore why Løgstrup believed that our modern obsession with looking completely inward, finding our own truth, meditating on our own identity is actually a really dangerous trap, and why true meaning only ever comes from the outside, crashing into us through our connections with other people.
Right, and to understand the sheer scale of what Løgstrup was trying to achieve, we really have to look at the philosophical fortress he was actively trying to tear down.
The fortress built by Kierkegaard.
Exactly. Kierkegaard's shadow over 20th century philosophy was massive, and his view of the human condition was incredibly severe. It was rooted deeply in a very specific flavor of Lutheran theology.
Which means we're talking about concepts of profound human brokenness, right? Like when I think of Kierkegaard, I think of this intense, almost agonizing focus on the solitary individual.
Yeah, that intense focus comes from what Kierkegaard called the infinite qualitative difference between humanity and the divine.
The infinite qualitative difference.
Right. In his worldview, earthly life is fundamentally marred by radical sin. Humans are down here, mired in selfishness and ego, while the divine, the absolute good, is infinitely far away.
So there's this uncrossable chasm.
Exactly. And because of this gap, Kierkegaard argued that everyday earthly life is almost a void. It lacks any inherent objective meaning.
So meaning isn't something you can just, stumble upon while taking a walk or having dinner with a friend?
Not at all. For Kierkegaard, meaning has to be forged. It's created by the individual through intense internal choices, paradoxes, and suffering.
Wow.
You have to constantly strip away your worldly attachments, even your earthly happiness, to make a desperate leap of faith toward the divine.
That sounds...
It's grueling. The individual's path is defined by this inward, isolating struggle against the void. And Løgstrup looked at this entire framework and basically labeled it a form of nihilism.
I mean, I can see why it sounds utterly exhausting.
It really is.
If Kierkegaard is right, the world is essentially a terrifyingly blank canvas. And we have to painfully, agonizingly paint the meaning onto it ourselves, completely alone. Every single day you wake up and have to generate your own reason to exist from scratch.
Yeah, and that burden is precisely what Løgstrup forcefully rejects. He argues that the existentialists, by focusing so intensely on the individual's internal agonizing, completely miss the fact that the universe already possesses a moral architecture.
Right.
Løgstrup claims that life comes preloaded with a framework of inherent goodness and value.
Okay, let's unpack this. So, swapping out the analogy,
Yeah.
if Kierkegaard thinks life is that blank canvas we have to paint ourselves, Løgstrup is saying life is more like a beautiful, incredibly complex game that already has rules established.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, if you break the rules, the game falls apart and you suffer. But if you just engage with the game, play by the rules, the meaning, the joy, and the goodness are already built into the board. You don't have to invent the concept of play from nothing.
That distinction is vital. For Løgstrup, the world isn't a void waiting for our interpretation. It is a creation. And as a creation, it is fundamentally good.
Right.
We don't inject value into a meaningless world. We participate in a world that is already brimming with value.
But that creates an immediate glaring problem, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if the world is inherently good and the rules of the game are set up for us to thrive, why are human beings constantly miserable? I mean, if we look at human history or even just our own daily lives, we are incredibly destructive.
Oh, sure.
We hurt each other, we sabotage ourselves, Where does all that misery come from if the architecture is supposedly so supportive?
That friction brings us directly to Løgstrup's diagnosis of the human condition. If the world is inherently good, the malfunction must be originating within us. But Løgstrup doesn't point to the grand, dramatic, demonic evil that Kierkegaard or later existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre like to obsess over. Løgstrup points to something much more mundane. He introduces the concept of encircling thoughts and emotions.
Encircling thoughts. I love that phrasing because it feels so physically restrictive. What kind of thoughts are we talking about here?
We're talking about jealousy, resentment, self-pity, wounded pride, and vanity.
Just the everyday stuff.
Exactly. Løgstrup observes that these phenomena originate entirely from our own ego. They don't exist out there in the world. They are our own internal creations.
Right.
And the crucial mechanism here is that they are entirely reactive. They aren't a true engagement with the reality of another person or situation. They're just a defensive reaction to our own insecurities.
It feels a bit like being trapped in a house where you've gone around and pulled down all the blinds.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah, and you wander from the room of vanity to the room of resentment. Maybe you take a quick nap in the chamber of self-pity. And because you're walking from room to room, you think you are exploring a vast, complex world of thought.
But you're not.
No, you are actually just pacing inside a mental escape room where you are simultaneously the prisoner and the guard.
That spatial metaphor is incredibly accurate to Løgstrup's philosophy. Because when you're consumed by jealousy or resentment, your world literally shrinks. You lose access to reality.
Wow.
You stop seeing the people around you as real, complex human beings with their own inner lives. You only see them as threats to your ego or obstacles to your desires or, audiences for your vanity. You become entirely self-enclosed.
Which is exactly what Kierkegaard was doing, in a way.
Exactly. This is where Løgstrup strongly critiques Kierkegaard and Sartre. By focusing on dramatic intellectual isolation, this grand tragedy of human existence, they miss this quiet, trivial trap of the self that plagues us every single day.
I think everyone listening knows the exact layout of that house with the drawn blinds. I mean, you get a vaguely critical email from a coworker, and suddenly you spend 3 hours pacing in the room of resentment.
Right, having elaborate, fake arguments in your head where you brilliantly defeat them.
Exactly. You are completely disconnected from the actual physical world around you. But wait. If we're the ones pulling the blinds down and we're the ones locking the doors, how do we get out?
That is the big question.
If I realize I'm stuck in an echo chamber of my own jealousy, what is the mechanism for escape?
Well, if we look at the core logic of Løgstrup's philosophy, the answer is incredibly humbling. We cannot break ourselves out.
Not at all. We can't logic our way out of our own ego.
We can try, but the mechanism is flawed. Because any conscious effort we make to break ourselves out is still being driven by our ego.
Oh, I see.
If you sit down and decide, I'm going to stop being jealous of my coworker because I want to be a superior, enlightened, mature person, you haven't actually left the house.
You've just wandered into the room of spiritual pride.
Precisely. You are still entirely focused on yourself. For Løgstrup, the rescue cannot be self-generated. It must come from the outside.
So if I can't think my way out of the house and my ego is too compromised to orchestrate an escape, that implies the rescue has to be an external force, something that bypasses my own logic entirely.
And that introduces us to the most defining feature of Løgstrup's thought, the sovereign expressions of life.
Sovereign expressions?
Yes. These are phenomena like spontaneous trust, mercy, open speech, and compassion. Løgstrup argues forcefully that these are not human inventions. They're not cultural norms that societies developed over thousands of years to keep people from killing each other.
Wait, really? If they aren't social constructs or biological survival tactics, what are they?
Løgstrup defines them as pre-cultural, anonymous, definitive powers of the universe itself.
That is a massive claim.
It is. The term philosophers use here is ontological. It means they belong to the fundamental nature of being. What's fascinating here is that you can think of how gravity is an objective physical force that acts upon mass. Løgstrup views trust and mercy as objective, life-giving forces that act upon human consciousness.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this, because it completely inverts how we normally think about morality.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so if I'm walking down the street, completely wrapped up in my own anxieties, and I see someone drop a heavy box of groceries, before I even think about it, I feel a surge of compassion, I rush over, and I help them pick up their scattered apples.
Right.
Normally, I would pat myself on the back and say, I am a good, moral person. But Løgstrup is saying that wasn't me generating goodness.
Right.
That was an objective power of the universe temporarily hijacking my selfish brain to enact mercy.
That is the radical decentering of the ego that Løgstrup demands. You did not produce the good. The good used you as a vessel. These expressions are called sovereign precisely because they rule us, they overtake us, even if just for a few seconds. Løgstrup often pointed to the biblical parable of the Good Samaritan to illustrate the mechanics of this.
How so?
Well, when the Samaritan saw the injured man on the road, he didn't stop to calculate his moral duty. He didn't weigh the pros and cons of helping. The text says he was moved with compassion. The mercy hit him from the outside.
It bypassed his ego.
Completely. It temporarily suspended his natural human selfishness, shattered his encircling thoughts, and forced him to act.
It's like the universe reaches through the window of that dark, suffocating house we're trapped in, grabs us by the collar, and violently yanks us outside into the fresh air.
Yes. And the fragility of this mechanism is vital to understand. The moment your ego wakes back up and starts calculating, the sovereign expression is destroyed.
Oh, so it's temporary.
Very. If you're helping that person with their groceries and you suddenly think, maybe someone is filming this for social media, or I hope this person realizes how generous I am, you have instantly retreated back into the house.
The blind snaps shut.
Exactly. The mercy has to remain spontaneous and uncalculated to remain pure. We are continually rescued by the good, but we can't claim ownership of it.
This shifts the entire burden of existence. Kierkegaard told us we had to be these heroic, isolated individuals forging meaning out of the void through sheer willpower.
Right.
And Løgstrup is telling us we are fundamentally a selfish mess, but we exist in a universe laced with spontaneous powers of trust and mercy that continually attempt to save us from our own inwardness.
Which forces us to look at how these metaphysical concepts operate in the mundane reality of everyday life. If the universe operates on interdependence rather than isolation, what does that actually look like when you are interacting with the people around you?
Right. How does this manifest when I'm just, ordering a coffee or sitting in a staff meeting?
This leads to Løgstrup's most famous formulation from his masterwork, The Ethical Demand. He writes that you never interact with another human being without holding a portion of their life in your hands.
Bringing us right back to the image we started with, the fragile thing in the palms of our hands.
Yes. Løgstrup argued that whenever we encounter someone, even in a completely trivial passing conversation, a demand is silently placed upon us. The other person has surrendered a piece of their life to us, and we are demanded to take care of it.
Just by interacting.
Yes. As you mentioned earlier, it might be something minor, like the barista's mood for the next hour based on whether you treat them with basic dignity or ignore them while looking at your phone. Or in other relationships, you might hold their entire destiny, like a parent holding the life of a child.
And because of this radical, unavoidable interdependence, Løgstrup makes a claim about human trust that feels very counterintuitive today. He argues that trust is actually the default state of humanity.
We are culturally conditioned to believe that trust must be earned, but Løgstrup demonstrates that the mechanics of human interactions say otherwise. Well, when you are in a strange city and you ask someone on the street for directions, you automatically trust that they won't intentionally send you the wrong way just to be cruel. The trust is given immediately, spontaneously.
That's true. I never really thought about that.
Mistrust only happens after that initial spontaneous trust is broken or betrayed. To communicate at all, to open your mouth and speak to another human being, is an act of surrendering a piece of yourself to them.
This is a breathtaking contrast to Kierkegaard's worldview. For Kierkegaard, the ultimate moral arena is entirely inside your own head, in fear and trembling, wrestling with your relationship to God.
Exactly.
For Løgstrup, the ultimate moral arena is right here, right now, in the physical space between you and the person standing 2 feet away from you.
And that focus on the immediate, spontaneous connection between people leads to Løgstrup's sharpest and most controversial critique. He took aim at traditional duty ethics. We're talking about the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, or even Kierkegaard's intense focus on internal moral resolve. Duty ethics operates on the idea that you should do the right thing because it adheres to a universal moral law.
Right, like Kant's idea of the categorical imperative, this rigid, uncompromising rule that you must never lie under any circumstances because the rule itself is what matters, regardless of the context or your personal feelings.
Løgstrup argues that acting out of duty or consciously trying to be a good moral person is actually a psychological trap. He introduces a concept he calls self-doubling.
Self-doubling. How does self-doubling work?
Imagine a scenario where a close friend is crying because they just received terrible news. If you comfort them out of spontaneous compassion, one of those sovereign expressions overtaking you, your focus is 100% outward.
Right.
You are looking only at your friend at their suffering. But suppose you don't feel any compassion in that moment. You are distracted or annoyed. Instead, you think to yourself, it is my moral duty as a good friend to comfort them.
Okay, I see where this is going.
What happens to your focus? You are no longer looking purely at your friend. You are looking at yourself looking at your friend. You have doubled your perspective.
Oh, that is insidious. Because by doing that, you've made the moral act about your internal purity.
Exactly.
You're checking a box on your own moral report card. You are using your friend's grief as an instrument to prove to yourself that you are a good person. You're right back in the house with the blinds pulled down, admiring yourself in the room of duty.
The action becomes entirely instrumental. It is no longer a pure, uncalculated response to the vulnerability of the other person. Your ego has hijacked the situation.
But hold on, I have to push back here. I understand the beauty of spontaneous mercy, but society functions on duty.
It does.
If I wait for a mystical wave of spontaneous compassion to hit me before I pay my taxes, or stop at a red light, or help a deeply annoying coworker pick up the papers they just dropped all over the floor, well, the world crumbles. Spontaneity is incredibly fickle.
That's a very fair point.
If I don't feel merciful toward that annoying coworker, isn't gritting my teeth and doing my duty by helping them anyway the only thing keeping society from descending into chaos? We need that reliable structure, don't we?
That friction you're pointing out is actually central to Løgstrup's later writings. He isn't a utopian anarchist. He recognizes that human beings are profoundly flawed. Our encircling thoughts are incredibly powerful, and as a result, spontaneity fails all the time.
Right. It's not a guarantee.
No, the sovereign expressions do not win every battle. And when spontaneity fails, Løgstrup concedes that norms, rules, and duty are absolutely necessary as a fallback mechanism. They are the structural safety net that prevents society from collapsing into cruelty and chaos.
Okay, so duty is the necessary safety net. It catches us when our spontaneous humanity fails.
Yes, but here is Løgstrup's critical warning. We must never idolize the safety net. We shouldn't confuse the backup plan with the ideal way of living.
Oh, that makes sense.
The immense danger of duty ethics and Kantian philosophy is that it elevates the safety net to the highest possible moral good. It teaches us to take immense pride in acting out of duty. Løgstrup says that is entirely backwards.
Because you're taking pride in the failure of your spontaneity.
Exactly. When you act out of duty, you shouldn't feel proud. You should feel a quiet sense of failure. Because acting out of duty means that the spontaneous, sovereign expression of life couldn't break through your selfishness.
Wow.
You had to rely on a rule because your humanity wasn't enough in that moment. True, uncorrupted life only happens when we forget ourselves completely and answer the silent demand of the other person without needing a rule book to tell us to do it.
This entire framework completely reorients how we view our place in the world. We started this journey with Kierkegaard's isolated individual, a person agonizing over the terrifying void of existence, exhausting themselves trying to forge meaning through sheer internal willpower and suffering.
A very lonely picture.
Extremely lonely. And we've watched Løgstrup dismantle that fortress. He leaves us with a vision of a deeply interconnected human being, a person who accepts that they are helplessly intertwined with others, walking around holding pieces of other people's lives in their hands.
Right.
A person who realizes their own mind is often a trap, but who trusts that they are continually being rescued by spontaneous acts of mercy and open speech that belong to the fabric of the universe itself.
It represents a profound shift in the center of gravity for human life. It moves the focus entirely from the isolated I to the connected we.
I love that.
It strips us of our moral arrogance by insisting we are not the authors of the good, while simultaneously offering the deep comfort that we can be the vessels for the good if we simply allow ourselves to be overtaken by it.
Before we wrap up, there's one final lingering idea tucked away in the later sources that expands this concept of rescue even further.
Oh, the physical perception aspect.
Yeah. As Løgstrup aged, he started to write about how we aren't just rescued by trust and mercy in our social interactions. He began to argue that physical sensory perception itself is a sovereign power from the outside.
He developed what he called the ethics of space.
Right.
The idea that just feeling the bodily world, experiencing the sheer, magnificent reality of a physical landscape, the depth of the sky, the vibration of sound has the power to dissolve our inward-looking echo chambers.
Which makes perfect sense within his framework.
Mhm.
If you are pacing inside the room of resentment, completely consumed by your own ego, stepping outside and looking at a vast, turbulent ocean or a towering forest forces your gaze outward.
Right. The physical world refuses to be ignored.
Exactly. It asserts its own objective reality against your subjective anxiety. It forces you to realize you are a small part of a massive, pre-existing creation.
The sheer reality of the physical universe demands your attention. And in doing so, it temporarily suspends your self-obsession. The physical world itself is part of the rescue mission.
I want to leave you with that thought. The next time you find yourself spiraling, when you realize you've been trapped in that dark house of your own anxieties, jealousies, and resentments, with all the blinds pulled tightly down, consider Løgstrup's perspective.
It's a powerful tool.
It is. Maybe the ultimate ethical act in that moment isn't to sit there and try to logic your way out. You can't outthink your own ego. Maybe the best thing you can possibly do is simply stand up, step outside, look at the physical world, and let the sheer, overwhelming reality of the universe break you out of yourself. Let the outside in.
It is a vital reminder that our isolation is mostly an illusion. We are fundamentally connected, and the forces of rescue are always waiting right outside the door, ready to pull us back into the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.